Mishmash! Kitbash Corner!
Yeah, today we're going to be kitbashing yet another Chaos Space Marine, except we're doing one of the lesser-known warbands. This, of course, being the Pyre. Now, who the hell are the Pyre? Well, they're a Chaos Space Marine warband that was released in 3rd edition. They bear quite the striking color scheme, and if you can't tell by this point, I wanted to paint them because they're orange. I just wanted to paint them because they're orange. I like orange Space Marines. But despite my selfish reasons for wanting to paint this warband, actually quite a few of you have asked me to paint these guys. And if you're familiar with my content, you'll know that I've had plenty of gripes with the handling of Chaos Space Marines in recent years. I don't know, man, this kid had so much going for it. Also, Crimson Slaughter and Red Corsairs deserve better. But before I start spurging about Chaos Space Marines yet again, if you like what you see, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share with a friend, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. For just $3 a month, you get to see my videos early, and for $5, you get access to a weekly Q&A stream. Additionally, you get access to exclusive roles and channels within the Mishmash Discord, and overall, it really helps me out. Just gonna tell you like it is, you're helping a guy do his dream job. Huge thank you to my channel members, you guys are amazing. And additionally, if you're interested in anything Wargames Atlantic related, especially Quar, you can use my affiliate link down below, and you can use my discount code MISHMASH5% to save 5% on your purchase. But enough of the promotional stuff, let's talk about the Pyre. So who are the Pyre? Well, the Pyre are an undivided Chaos Space Marine warband, and they like to burn people. Okay, that's a very rudimentary way of describing them, but overall, the Pyre is a very interesting warband as they're kind of shrouded in mystery. Their origin is completely unknown, as we have no idea whether or not they formed from a known warband or several different warbands cobbled together. In terms of their tactics and battle tendencies, these guys really favor short-range combat. And yeah, they really like flamers. Interestingly, however, they don't really seem to work with other Chaos warbands, but rather work with Beasts from the Warp and all sorts of Chaos cultists. They do have a couple of notable characters, this being Goeth Darkflame, a chosen Terminator. He's pretty amazing, actually. Holy shit. As far as his character goes, he's a bold and brash dude that just really hates the Imperium. Kind of bare bones, he doesn't exactly have too much in terms of his investment into the Chaos Gods. There's also a little bit of Starscream to him, he really does like picking on people that are a lot smaller than him. And though he does fancy him a rather tough cookie, you wouldn't catch him scoffing at the idea of a tactical retreat. But before I talk too much about him, I might have to save that for a future video. Overall, the Pyre is one of those warbands that, despite barely anybody seeming to know who they are, they actually have kind of a cool little bit of lore. Of course, by this point, you can probably guess I'm way more a painter than I am a lore enthusiast, but I have kind of a soft spot for these guys. And it's not just because they're orange. It's because they're orange. But now that I've yapped at you a little bit about the Pyre, I think it's about time we kitbash one. Now to start things out, we're going to be going full force with the flamer stuff. I'll be using this hand flamer from the old Blood Angels tactical squad, and I'll be slicing off the blood drip. We'll then begin building the main body of the Chaos Marine, and I have to give a huge thank you to one of my viewers. This Marine body, along with an entire Chaos Marine army itself, was gifted to me almost a year ago, and I'm just now finally getting around to using them. So, again, thank you very much. But as you can see, for the head, I'm opting to go for that classic horned helmet from the vintage Chaos Marines kit. It's just so befitting of the body itself and the Pyre's design. Of all the designs I've seen of these guys, they all have horned helmets. And that's another reason why I think it's kind of a shame that the current horned ones just don't look quite right to me. Just a little bit too much decoration. Now afterwards, I began attaching the arms to the body, but I had to glue on the hand flamer first to the arm, and I would give him another arm with a chain axe. It's pretty befitting, up close and personal is basically everything these guys are all about, and I've seen kind of a few conversions of making them into Khorne Berserkers, which looks cool. Speaking of which, his backpack is actually from the New Age Khorne Berserkers kit. I like this one especially for the little Morning Star vents. But now to give his flamer a little bit more flair, I decided to slice off the muzzle from one of the Horus Heresy pattern flamers. Though I was tempted to go for a more chaosy look, I kinda like how this looks to begin with, I just thought it would be interesting. And it's a relatively simple process, though I kind of made it a little bit more complicated than it needed to be, because snipping off the flamer's original muzzle while attached to the figure was a really fiddly process. I ultimately decided to just yank it off the figure because there was no way I was going to do this in a nice, clean way. And after popping off the flamer, I would dryly fit on the new muzzle just to make sure that everything lined up perfectly. I would, however, need to sand things down just a little to ultimately achieve that. And after a little while of sanding things down, I would use a little bit of Tamiya cement to glue the pieces together. Sometimes with little fiddly pieces like this, I think it pays to use the thicker Tamiya. That just makes sure that it doesn't spill everywhere and I can mold things into place to my liking. And thankfully, these pieces actually fit together really nicely once you actually sand things down correctly. It looks almost seamless in a way, which is kind of why I wanted to do it to begin with. And though it doesn't look as chaosy, I still think it looks rather unique. Plus, Chaos Marines typically use older technology, so I think it works. But now for the finishing details, I'm going to be adding on these OG pauldrons from the vintage Chaos Marines kit. And I'm sad to say that I think these might be the last ones I have in my collection. Oh man, I wish I could find another one of these boxes. It's still such an amazing kit to this day, and I really miss it. But with those little details of mixing and matching these old kits with the new ones, I have modeled my ideal modern Chaos Space Marine. I know it's bare bones, but I think it just really works for these guys. Beyond the singular character art we have of them, I think this is a really fitting figure. It just kinda encapsulates everything that they're all about. And it's another reason why I think the OG Chaos kit just feels so much more befitting for any sort of different Legion or Warband. Bleh. Okay, I said I was gonna stop ranting about it. I will stick to it. But now that he's built, I think it's about time we get to the painting. Now first and foremost, here's a little look at the paints list, and I do want to mention, this is essentially a redux of my Angel's Resplendent paint job I did almost a year and a half ago. This warband and that chapter share almost identical paint schemes in terms of their overall design and colors, but I do change things here and there. Now to start things out, after a Zenithal Prime, I would begin airbrushing over the entire miniature using some Magmadroth Flame. Like always, you don't need an airbrush to apply this. I just prefer using an airbrush for my priming and my initial base coats. It just saves me so much more time. To get the same level of smoothness that I get with the airbrush if I applied it using a regular brush would take much longer. But after this initial base coat is complete, I will begin recess shading the entire model using some Fugan Orange from Citadel. This is a very subtle shade, but it makes a big difference. It doesn't really seem like something you'd need to do, and if you want, you can tone things down further with an all-over wash, but I find the vibrancy of the orange being toned down is just not something I really like. I suppose using this all over the model could have differentiated it from my Angel's Resplendent color scheme, but the vibrancy of Magmadroth Flame is just too much for me to not want to do, so I like it as is. But once our shade is dry, we'll begin using black over all the black elements on the model. This includes all the metals, the trim, and basically everything that isn't orange. This takes a lot of detail and a lot of patience. I really don't want to mess up any of the orange. And if I do, it's not the end of the world. Simply applying some ivory or white colors over the areas that we spill and then reapplying Magmadroth Flame really does just clean things up. But I like to do it in one go. And another plus of using these OG pieces for the Chaos parts, we really don't need to deal with as much fiddly Chaos trim as we do with the newer stuff. Now, once the black is fully applied, I would apply a little bit of warm brown to the muzzle of the flamer. This is just because I use more gold colors on the end of the flamer, and I find brown colors to be a better undertone for golds. Now we can begin sponging on our highlights and adding in our subtle highlights using some orange flare from 2 thin coats. This color is an essential. It's a very creamy orange, and it does look quite bright, but we'll actually up the ante further later in the video. You just want to make sure you get on these highlights, and I know that it is a little sketchy, but it's my style. I really like adding scrapes and scratches to armor, and especially for a Chaos unit, it just feels all the more befitting. And quite frankly, I don't really have the patience to do every single bit as clean as possible. Now, for the metallic areas, I'm using some dark silver. This will be used on some of the vents and the little coils between the joints. I also use this on little bits of the flamer, but overall, it's pretty sparse. Again, just be careful when applying this. Using metallic colors over black can be a little difficult to remove, as little metallic flakes can linger pretty easily. Now, once the black and metallic is completely dry, I'll then be shading these areas using Nuln Oil. It's been a while since I've used regular old Nuln Oil, and I think this is a better color for this kind of treatment than using Oblivion Blackwash. Typically, I like Oblivion Blackwash better overall, but I do think the subtlety of the New Age Citadel Nuln Oil is a better fit for the black colors. And while that dries, I'll be painting on this little skull using a little bit of burnt red from Pyrocryl. I actually didn't end up freehanding the symbol, as I didn't really know how I wanted to do it. It's a little simplistic, so I just used this as a little bit of a badge. Now for his loincloth, I decided to differentiate things a little bit, and I began painting this using a mixture of black and dark sea blue from Pyrocryl. Blue and orange are a really cool color combination, and I felt like using a very subtle blue would work all the more. So simply adding this on the raised surfaces and working up to a brighter blue later on is exactly what I want to do. Now, once we're done with the loincloth, I'd begin dry brushing on over some of the black elements using a little bit of rubber black from AK Interactive. I would also use this in the form of a regular highlight, but I like how this looks as a dry brush over the horns specifically. I felt like dry brushing it over the horns gave it a much more natural and biological look over just simply highlighting over using my regular brush. That and dry brushing it is a little bit easier. When it comes to highlighting, I am being very careful as I don't really want to spill this too much. But it's not the end of the world if you paint over the entire trim using your highlight color. Later on, we can simply just add in a little black in the center to really differentiate the colors. This color in particular, I'm a huge fan of, and I think it really does help out with some of the grays. Eshin Gray is one of those colors that I like, but I do kind of like the subtlety of this color better. And to bring home the highlights for the black, I mixed a little bit of rubber black with some bold titanium white, around 3:2, to create a much brighter black, and so we can finish off the rest of the highlights. After doing so, we'll go back to the orange, and now I'm using a little Fire Dragon Bright from Citadel to create really stark highlights. As you can see, I'm actually repainting over some of the chipped areas, just to create a little bit more of a stark contrast. This is exactly what we want to do when we're making the paint chips in the armor. The starker the contrast is for the paint chips, the more effective they'll look. And I did realize by this point, I actually didn't paint the hands black. There are different depictions of these guys, sometimes they have black hands, sometimes they don't. Kinda wish I painted them black, but I don't know. I think the orange hands look good too. Now to finish off the rest of the highlights, I began using a little bit of Dark Sun Yellow from Two Thin Coats to really drive home the orange. It's a very bright color, and I don't even think you really need to use it. I think it's better applied when applying it at the very tips of some of the orange colors. I think in some areas I went a little too harsh with it, but this is where we can use some glazes if we really want to drive things back to the oranger color. However, I do think the Dark Sun Yellow is kind of necessary in other ways, as it does effectively bring this color scheme more in line with the original Third Ed image. The original color scheme is a very yellowy orange, but once we're happy with the orange, I would begin painting some of the little cables using a little bit of green from Pyrocryl mixed with black, and I would highlight this up using pure green and a little bit of yellow. I didn't quite get this on camera the way I wanted it to, and I do think it's a little too bold in some areas, but it does kind of give a little bit of a Halloween-y vibe to him. Plus, we'll be painting the eyes green anyway, so I think adding a little bit of extra green wasn't a terrible idea. But now to paint the muzzle of the flamer, I'll be using a mixture of 2:1 bronze and copper from Pyrocryl. Combining these two together really made for a stellar color. I really like how this looks. Little side note, I like this color so much that I almost want to paint golden griffins with this color. It's been a chapter I've wanted to paint for a very long time. Now that we're on the home stretch, I'll be creating a little slit into the eyes using a little bit of Dark Sun Yellow. Typically I like to use bold titanium white as it kind of works for any color that you fill into the eyes, but since I really wanted the green to stand out, I thought that using a very warm color would make them glow all the more, and I was right. I like how this looks. I suppose if I was feeling brave, I'd use a little bit of bold titanium white over the yellow just to really drive it home, but getting that on camera was, yeah. But once the slits were fully painted and dry, I would fill in the eyes using some Karandros green from Citadel. This wonderfully vibrant green along with the dark sun yellow creates some really nice looking eyes. I really like how these look. Once the eyes were complete, I'd paint over the little skull on the chapter badge, or whatever you want to call it, using a little bit of dragon red from Army Painter. This is a very stark red, and it just makes it stand out all the more. It's very simplistic, but this skull is so small that just adding in some stark contrast is all I really needed to do to really make it stand out. So I'm happy with how it looks. And to finish off the armor, we're going to be doing my classic method of filling in all these little chips using some dryad bark. Like always, just be sure to really fill in the lines, and you don't really have to do much else. I feel like I'm a broken record at this point, it's just my bread and butter to do this. I think I've done this in the last few videos. But whatever, it looks cool. And I've yet to hear anybody complain about it, so whatever. But after giving him a very simple urban base, this guy is complete, and I love this figure. To get this orange color does require quite a few paints, but I think it's worth it, and I have to say it's one of my favorite schemes I've come up with on my own. Orange armor is one of those things that I just love painting, and even though it is a tedious process, I love doing it regardless. So every chance that I get to do it, it's really fun. And again, I'm really happy to finally paint this warband for the few people that were really clamoring for it. But before we wrap things up, I do want to mention you should keep your eyes out for next week, as we have another collab video coming. That's right, we're taking a little detour to the Lich's laboratory, and we're going to be kitbashing some Space Marines. So keep your eyes out for that next week. But I've definitely been flapping my beak enough for one video. So make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share it with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kitbash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.